Jack Hudson stared out the window of his small apartment in Washington, D.C., not really seeing the city lights below. It had been 3 weeks since the ships appeared in orbit, and the world was still reeling. Nobody had expected first contact to happen on a Tuesday afternoon. The massive vessels simply appeared, positioning themselves above major cities across the globe. For 12 tense hours, they remained silent while militaries mobilized and civilians panicked. Then came the transmission, in perfect English and simultaneously in every major language on Earth, requesting diplomatic contact. Jack had been in a budget meeting at the UN Liaison Office when his boss burst in. "Hudson, the Secretary General wants anyone with linguistic and diplomatic experience." Now, at 34, Jack was neither senior enough to be intimidating nor junior enough to be overlooked. His 10 years in diplomatic service had taken him from conflict zones to trade negotiations, with a knack for learning languages that made him valuable but not irreplaceable. Until now. The next days passed in a blur. The aliens identified themselves as representatives of the Galactic Confederation, a loose alliance of spacefaring civilizations. Earth, they explained, had finally developed enough technology to be noticed. The Confederation operated under a complex system of laws and protocols, and Earth would need representatives at their council. "Why me?" Jack asked Secretary General Rivera when he found himself on a short list of potential delegates. "Because you stay calm under pressure, Hudson. You listen before you speak, and right now we need someone who won't accidentally start an interstellar incident." A week later, Jack found himself in a room with 11 other humans from various nations. Diplomats, scientists, a retired general, all chosen to represent humanity in its first steps onto the galactic stage. Dr. Olivia Wright, an exobiologist, leaned toward Jack during orientation. "Did you notice? They seem almost disappointed when we ask questions, like they expected us to be more primitive." Jack had noticed. The alien representatives, tall blue-skinned beings who called themselves the Arithi, maintained polite demeanors but couldn't hide their surprise when humans grasped complex concepts quickly. "We're being underestimated," Jack whispered back. "That could be useful." 2 weeks of intensive training followed. The humans learned about major Confederation species, basic protocols, and the complex hierarchy of the Galactic Council. Jack absorbed everything, staying up late studying the cultural briefs and language primers provided by their Arithi liaisons. When the final delegation was announced, Jack was shocked to hear his name called first. "Hudson, Jack, primary diplomatic representative." The Arithi representative, Callan, approached him afterward. "Your neural patterns show adaptability and cognitive flexibility, unusual for newly contacted species," she said, her translator device giving her words an oddly flat tone. "The council will find you interesting." Departure day arrived with little fanfare. Earth governments had decided to keep the delegations leaving low-key, worried about public reaction. Jack's parents received a vague explanation about a special diplomatic assignment. His sister got a more honest video message that he asked her not to share until he was gone. The transport shuttle was smaller than Jack expected, with curved walls and lighting that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. As Earth shrank below them, he felt the weight of responsibility growing heavier. "First time off-planet?" asked Nicole Garcia, a climate scientist also on the delegation. "First time beyond the stratosphere," Jack replied with a weak smile. The shuttle docked with a much larger Confederation vessel in orbit. As the airlock cycled open, Kalen gestured them forward. "Representatives of Earth, welcome aboard the Celestial Harmony. Our journey to the Council Station will take approximately 7 of your days. Please follow me to your quarters." Jack took a deep breath and stepped through the doorway, becoming one of the first humans to board an alien vessel. The door to Earth closed behind him, and the door to humanity's future in the stars opened ahead. The Celestial Harmony emerged from faster-than-light travel with a subtle shudder that woke Jack from an uneasy sleep. He rushed to the viewport in his quarters to see the Galactic Council station for the first time. It was enormous. A massive ring structure orbited a small blue star, with thousands of ships of various designs docked along its outer edge. Spires and domes protruded from its surface, gleaming in the starlight. Jack had seen impressive structures on Earth, but nothing approached this scale of engineering. "Magnificent, isn't it?" Callan said, entering the room. Constructed over 3 centuries by 17 different species, the council chamber itself can accommodate representatives from over 4,000 worlds simultaneously. "How many species are part of the Confederation?" Jack asked, still staring at the station. "Currently, 217 have full membership. Another 800 have observer status. Earth will begin as a probationary member with limited voting rights." The human delegation was escorted to a shuttle for transport to the station. As they approached, Jack noticed defensive installations and patrol vessels. This wasn't just a political center, it was a fortress. Their quarters on the station were surprisingly Earth-like, though the gravity felt slightly stronger. Jack had barely settled in when a small, insect-like creature appeared at his door. "Greetings, human Hudson. I am Zixera of the Nithic Collective. I will serve as your diplomatic aide during council proceedings." Its voice came from a translator device around what Jack guessed was its neck. Zixera's compound eyes studied Jack intensely. "You should understand the political situation before your first session. Follow me to the orientation hall." As they walked through wide corridors, Jack observed the diversity of alien life. Some species towered over him, while others barely reached his knees. Some moved on tentacles, others on multiple legs, and still others floated above the ground. "The council is dominated by 3 major factions," Zixera explained. "The Vorax Imperium controls the largest territory. They are militaristic and expansionist." As if on cue, a group of tall reptilian beings in ornate armor strode past, ignoring the smaller species that hurried out of their way. "Those are Vorax," Zixera confirmed. "Next in influence are the Eldar Conclave. They were among the first spacefaring species and consider themselves the wisest voices in galactic affairs." Jack observed elegant, willowy beings with silver skin and flowing garments engaged in quiet conversation nearby. "Finally, my people, the Nithic Collective. We are connected through a shared consciousness and serve as information brokers and mediators." In the orientation hall, a holographic display showed the galaxy with colored regions indicating territorial claims. Earth appeared as a small blinking light in an area where several territories converge. "Your solar system is in a contested region," Zixera stated bluntly. "The Vorax believe it should fall under their influence sphere." Jack felt a chill. "Is that why we were contacted now?" "Precisely. The Vorax discovered your civilization and were preparing a claim. The Eldar insisted on proper diplomatic contact first, following Confederation law." After the orientation, Jack met with Nicole and the rest of the human delegation to share what they'd learned. Their discussion was interrupted by an announcement of a diplomatic reception that evening. The reception was held in a vast hall with a transparent ceiling showing the stars. As the humans entered, conversations stopped momentarily as hundreds of alien eyes turned to observe them. "They're looking at us like we're zoo animals," Nicole whispered. "Or like we're children who wandered into an adult party," Jack replied. A tall Vorax approached them, flanked by aides. "So these are the humans," he said, looking down at Jack. "I am Supreme Commander Dravik. Your world sits in a strategically valuable location." "We value our independence, Commander," Jack responded carefully. Dravik made a sound that might have been laughter. "Independence is a luxury in galactic politics, human. The Council convenes tomorrow to discuss your world status. I suggest you prepare yourselves." As Dravik walked away, Jack exchanged worried glances with Nicole. Earth's position was clearly more precarious than they had been led to believe. Tomorrow would determine if humanity would enter galactic society as equals or subjects. Jack awoke early the next morning. his mind racing with everything he needed to learn. Zixera had promised to explain council procedures before the first session, and Jack wanted to be prepared. His door chimed, but instead of the insect-like Nithik, a human woman stood in the hallway. She was tall with short brown hair and carried herself with military precision. Jack Hudson. I'm Amelia Foster, United States Space Force Intelligence. I've been embedded with the Eldar delegation for the past week. Jack blinked in surprise. There were humans here before us. Just me. Special arrangement. I've been gathering information while you were in transit. She stepped into his quarters and lowered her voice. We need to talk privately. Once the door closed, Amelia activated a small device that emitted a soft hum. Scrambler. Blocks most listening technologies. We have 10 minutes before it becomes obvious. The situation is worse than they've told you, she continued. Earth sits on a junction of 3 major trade routes and possesses unusual mineral deposits. The Vorax want control, not cooperation. Jack ran a hand through his hair. Zixera mentioned something about our status being discussed today. It's more than a discussion. It's a vote on whether Earth qualifies for independent status or requires protective oversight. That's a polite term for making us a client state. Can they do that? Jack asked, alarmed. They can and have with other developing worlds. The Confederation has protocols for integrating new species. Those deemed unstable are placed under the guardianship of an established power. Amelia's device beeped softly. Time's almost up. Meet me in Sector 7, Level 3 after your meeting with Zixera. There's someone you should meet. After she left, Zixera arrived to begin Jack's education in council politics. The Nithik brought up holographic displays showing the complex voting systems and alliance structures that governed Confederation decisions. Each full member has 1 vote, but votes are weighted by population, territory, and development index, Zixera explained. The 3 major factions, Vorax, Eldar, and Nithik, rarely agree, which gives minor species collective influence if they unite. How do smaller species protect their interests? Jack asked. Coalition building. Species with shared concerns form voting blocks. Zixera's compound eyes studied Jack. Humans would be wise to seek allies among the independent worlds. After 3 hours of intensive training, Jack made his way to the meeting point Amelia had specified. He found her waiting with a blue-skinned, 4-armed being. This is Kellner of the Rithian Assembly, Amelia introduced. The Rithians went through what Earth is facing now, 80 years ago. Kellner nodded solemnly. My world was placed under Vorax protection for 60 years. We gained independence only after significant resource depletion. The Vorax will argue that humanity's history of conflict makes us unstable, Amelia explained. They'll cite our nuclear weapons and ongoing regional disputes as evidence. But that's internal Earth business, Jack protested. To the Council, a species that might destroy itself cannot be trusted with interstellar capabilities. Kellner said, the Vorax delegation has already circulated reports about your world wars. What can we do? Jack asked. Form alliances quickly, Kellner advised. I represent a coalition of formerly subjugated worlds. We call ourselves the Sovereign Worlds Compact. We vote as a bloc on integration matters. How many votes do you control? Jack asked. 23 full members. Not enough to overcome the Vorax alone, but with the right additional support. We need to convince enough neutral species that humanity deserves a chance, Amelia concluded. And we need to study the Confederation Charter for loopholes. Later that evening, the human delegation gathered for dinner. Jack and Amelia shared what they had learned, causing visible concern among their colleagues. We have 3 days until the formal vote, Jack explained. We need to learn everything we can about council procedures and make as many allies as possible. Nickel looked troubled. They see us as primitive, dangerous even. How do we overcome that perception in just 3 days? By proving them wrong, Jack said firmly. We'll show them humanity deserves a seat at the table, not a cage. Tomorrow, we split up and meet with as many delegations as possible. Earth's future depends on what we do in the next 72 hours. The council preparatory session began early the next day. Jack and the human delegation took their assigned seats in a section reserved for probationary members. The chamber was immense, with concentric rings of seats rising in tiers around a central speaking platform. The major species occupied the innermost rings, with status diminishing as one moved outward. Supreme Commander Dravik of the Vorax stood to address the gathering, his voice amplified throughout the chamber. Esteemed representatives, today we consider the status of Sol System and its inhabited world Earth. The Vorax Imperium proposes that humanity be classified as a Category 3 developing species, requiring protective oversight until sufficient stability is demonstrated. Dravik activated a holographic display showing Earth's history. Images of world wars, nuclear explosions, and environmental damage appeared before the assembled delegates. The evidence is clear, Dravik continued. Humans have repeatedly engaged in planet-wide conflicts using weapons of mass destruction. They continue to maintain arsenals capable of rendering their world uninhabitable. Such a species cannot be permitted unrestricted access to interstellar technology. Jack felt his heart sink as murmurs of agreement spread through the chamber. The Vorax presentation was persuasive, cherry-picking humanity's worst moments without context. When Dravik finished, an Eldar representative rose. The conclave acknowledges the Vorax concerns but proposes a 50-year observation period before final status determination. A delay that still denies Earth immediate sovereignty, Amelia whispered to Jack. The Nithic speaker was next. The collective suggests shared oversight by all three major powers, with human representatives serving in advisory capacity only. As the session continued, Jack frantically took notes. The formal vote would occur in 2 days, and it seemed Earth had few supporters. After the session, Jack and Amelia split up to meet with potential allies identified by Kelnar. Jack approached the representatives of the Tauran Federation, a coalition of 6 worlds that had achieved independence 30 years earlier. Your situation is familiar to us, said the Tauran delegate, a broad-shouldered being with iridescent scales. The Vorax claimed our worlds were too fractious to govern themselves. It took us decades to prove otherwise. How did you achieve independence? Jack asked. We found a provision in the Charter, the Sovereign Development Clause. It states that species demonstrating capacity for unified action in crisis may petition for accelerated independence review. Jack immediately sent this information to Amelia, who was meeting with delegates from the Meridian Alliance. Her response came quickly. Meeting at our quarters tonight. Bringing allies. Throughout the day, the human delegation spread out across the station, making connections and pleading their case. Some species were sympathetic but unwilling to challenge the Vorax. Others seemed genuinely concerned about humanity's violent tendencies. That evening, representatives from 7 independent species gathered in the human delegation's common room. Security scramblers hummed in every corner. The situation is dire, but not hopeless, Kelnar began. We've identified 29 potential votes in favor of Earth's independence. We need 40 to block the Vorax proposal. I've analyzed the Charter, said a slender, amphibious being named Lizara. The Sovereign Development Clause could help, but you need evidence of unified planetary response to crisis. The first contact response, Nichols suggested. Earth's nations unified quickly when the Confederation ships arrived. Not enough, Kelnar replied. The response must demonstrate altruism, not just self-preservation. As the discussion continued, an urgent message arrived for Jack. It was from Zixara. Critical information discovered. Meet immediately. Server level, Section 12. Jack showed the message to Amelia, who frowned. Could be a trap. I'll go with you. They excused themselves and headed to the lower levels of the station. Section 12 contained data processing centers for the Council archives. When they arrived, Zixara was waiting with what appeared to be restricted files displayed on a terminal. I risk much by showing you this, the Nithik said, mandibles clicking nervously. The Vorax claim to Earth is not about security concerns. They have discovered something valuable in your solar system. The display showed geological surveys of Earth and other bodies in the Sol system. One element was highlighted repeatedly. This rare isotope is crucial for next-generation faster-than-light drives, 6 Era explained. Your system contains the largest known concentration. The Vorax wished to control its extraction. Jack and Amelia exchanged glances. The real motive behind the Vorax proposal was resource exploitation, not security. This changes everything, Amelia said. We have leverage now. Use it wisely, Zixera warned. The Vorax will not surrender such a prize easily. Jack and Amelia hurried back to the human quarters, careful not to draw attention. The information from Zixera changed everything. This wasn't just about Earth's status. It was about valuable resources the Vorax wanted to control. We need to search the archives for precedent, Jack said as they rejoined the others. If other worlds faced similar situations, we might find legal grounds to challenge the Vorax. Kellner nodded. The Council Library contains records of all membership disputes, but access is restricted for probationary members. I can help with that, said Lazara, the amphibious delegate. My people serve as archivists. I can grant temporary research privileges. Jack spent the night in the vast Council Library, scanning case after case of species integration disputes. Near dawn, bleary-eyed and exhausted, he found what he needed. The Altarian precedent, he murmured, reading the ancient case file. A century ago, the Vorax attempted to place Altaria under protective oversight, citing security concerns. The Altarians proved the real motive was access to their crystalline moon deposits. The case established that resource acquisition could not be the primary motivation for oversight status. If a species could demonstrate that claims against their sovereignty were made in bad faith, they could petition for immediate full membership. Jack rushed to share his discovery with the others. Amelia had been equally busy, working with Nicole to compile Earth's unified response to various global crises, pandemic cooperation, climate initiatives, international disaster relief. We have the legal basis and the evidence of Earth's cooperation, Jack explained to the assembled allies. But we need proof of the Vorax's true intentions. The geological surveys Zixera showed us, Amelia suggested. Not enough, Kelmar cautioned. Those only prove the resources exist, not that the Vorax are motivated by them. Lizara offered a solution. The Vorax must have filed resource claims with the Confederation Mining Authority. Those records would prove their interest predates their security concerns. How do we access those? Jack asked. I know someone. Lizara replied with what Jack interpreted as a smile. While Lizara pursued the mining records, Jack and Amelia focused on building their coalition. They met with representatives from 20 different species, carefully explaining Earth's situation and the precedent they'd discovered. Many were receptive, particularly those who had faced Vorax expansion themselves. By midday, their potential vote count had grown to 35, still short of the 40 needed, but progress. Jack returned to his quarters that evening to find the door slightly ajar. Heart pounding, he carefully pushed it open. The room had been searched, drawers left open and belongings disturbed. His data tablet was missing. He immediately alerted Amelia, who arrived minutes later with 2 Nithic security officers. This confirms we're on the right track, she said grimly. We've threatened someone enough that they're getting nervous. The tablet had all my research notes on the Altarian precedent, Jack said. Fortunately, I've backed up our findings, Amelia replied. But this means we need to move quickly. The vote is tomorrow, and our opponents know what we're planning. Late that night, Lizar arrived with the evidence they needed. Official Vorax mining claims for the Sol system, filed 3 standard years before Earth was even contacted. The claims specifically mentioned the rare isotope Zixera had identified. This is it, Jack said, reviewing the documents. proof that their security concerns are a pretext for resource exploitation. Be careful, Kelmar warned. The Vorax have significant influence in the Council. Challenging them directly could backfire. We don't need to challenge them directly, Jack replied, an idea forming. We just need to make sure the right people see this evidence before the vote. They worked through the night, preparing their case and distributing key information to sympathetic council members. Jack practiced his address repeatedly, knowing he would have only one opportunity to speak before the council. As the station's artificial dawn arrived, Jack received an urgent message from Zixara. Vorax delegation has requested emergency early vote. Council convening in 1 hour. Hurry. They're trying to catch us unprepared, Amelia said as they rushed to gather their materials. Jack nodded grimly. They won't succeed. Earth has waited too long for this moment. We're ready. Jack and the human delegation raced through the station corridors toward the council chamber. News of the emergency early vote had thrown their careful plans into disarray, but they refused to be caught unprepared. They're trying to rush this through before we can present our evidence, Amelia said as they hurried past startled aliens of various species. Typical Vorax tactics, Kelnar added, struggling to keep pace with the humans. They've done this before when they feared losing a vote. They arrived at the council antechamber to find representatives from dozens of worlds gathering, many looking confused by the sudden schedule change. Jack spotted Supreme Commander Dravik speaking with several Eldar representatives, his reptilian features set in a confident expression. We need to distribute our evidence packets now, Jack said. Nickel, Amelia, take the outer rings. I'll try to reach the neutral major powers. As they split up, Jack felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to find Zixara looking more agitated than he'd ever seen the normally composed Nivik. There is a complication, Zixara said quietly. The Vorax have filed a procedural motion to limit debate time to 1 speaker per delegation, maximum 3 minutes each. 3 minutes. Jack felt his heart sink. That's barely enough time to introduce our case, let alone present evidence. It gets worse, Zixara continued. As a probationary member, Earth would normally speak last. By then, many minds will be made up. Jack thought quickly. Is there any way to change the speaking order? Only through sponsorship by a full member who yields their speaking time. Zixara's compound eyes studied Jack. I will speak with my collective. As they entered the chamber, Jack was struck by how full it was. Word of the contentious vote had spread, drawing representatives who might normally skip routine sessions. The gallery above, reserved for non-voting observers, was packed with curious onlookers. Jack found his seat with the human delegation, just as the council leader, an ancient Eldar named Shirval, called the session to order. By request of the Vorax Imperium, we convene this emergency session to vote on Resolution 7293, the status of Sol System and protective oversight of Earth, Shirval announced. Speaking times are limited to 3 minutes per delegation, as voted by procedural committee. The Vorax representative spoke first, presenting a polished case for placing Earth under their protection. He displayed selected images of human conflicts and emphasized the danger of allowing an unstable species independent access to advanced technology. The safety of the galactic community requires careful integration of new species, he concluded smoothly. The Vorax Imperium has successfully guided 17 developing worlds to eventual self-governance. We offer Earth the same path to stability. One by one, other delegations spoke. The Eldar suggested caution but ultimately supported oversight. Several minor powers aligned with the Vorax voiced strong agreement. Jack watched anxiously as the momentum built against Earth. When the mythic turn came, Zixara rose. The collective has evaluated human development patterns and finds them consistent with normal species evolution. However, rather than present our analysis, we yield our speaking time to the human delegation. A murmur of surprise rippled through the chamber. Jack, startled but prepared, gathered his materials and moved toward the central platform. This unexpected opportunity could change everything. As he reached the speaker's position, Jack noticed Dravik leaning forward, mandibles clicking in what appeared to be annoyance. Other delegates watched with renewed interest, surprised by this procedural maneuver. Jack placed his data crystal in the reader, but instead of displaying his prepared graphics, the system showed a different presentation entirely: benign images of Earth landscapes. Technical difficulties, a council technician announced. Please stand by. Jack realized immediately what had happened. Someone had sabotaged his presentation. Without visual evidence, his case would be severely weakened. He had seconds to decide how to proceed. Looking out at the thousands of alien faces watching him, Jack made his choice. He removed the corrupted data crystal and stepped forward. He would have to rely on words alone to save Earth's independence. Distinguished representatives, he began, his voice steady despite his racing heart. Today you vote not just on Earth's status, but on the integrity of this council's founding principles. The time indicator began counting down his precious 3 minutes as Jack fought for humanity's future among the stars. Jack stood at the center of the council chamber, keenly aware of the thousands of eyes fixed on him. With his presentation sabotaged and only 3 minutes to make his case, he needed to be both concise and compelling. Distinguished representatives of the Galactic Council, he began, his voice stronger than he expected. I stand before you as Earth faces a critical moment in its history. The decision you make today will determine whether humanity enters the galactic community as partners or as subjects. Jack glanced at the time indicator. Already 30 seconds gone. The Vorax claim that humanity is too dangerous to govern itself, that our history of conflict makes us unworthy of independence. They offer protection while citing our violent tendencies. He paused, scanning the chamber. The delegates were listening attentively, but he could sense skepticism from many. But consider this: every spacefaring species in this chamber evolved through struggle. Every civilization represented here today faced internal conflicts before achieving unity. The path to the stars is never smooth. Jack noticed Supreme Commander Dravik shifting uncomfortably as several delegates nodded in agreement. What the Vorax have not told you, what they hope to hide by calling this emergency vote, is that their concern for galactic safety is not their true motivation. A murmur spread through the chamber. Jack pressed on, his time rapidly diminishing. 3 standard years before first contact with Earth, the Vorax Imperium filed mining claims for a rare isotope found in our solar system. An isotope critical for next-generation propulsion technology. These claims explicitly identified Earth as a target for resource extraction. The murmur grew louder. Jack could see Dravik conferring urgently with his aides. I cannot show you the documentation as planned, due to what I'm sure was an unfortunate technical malfunction, Jack said with deliberate emphasis. But the records exist in the Confederation Mining Authority archives. File designation CMAV 29173. Delegates throughout the chamber were accessing data terminals, likely searching for the file he had mentioned. Jack had less than a minute remaining. The Altarian precedent established that resource acquisition cannot be the primary motivation for imposing oversight status. I respectfully submit that the Vorax proposal violates this precedent and the founding principles of the Confederation. As Jack continued, he saw Amelia and Nickel moving through the chamber, quietly distributing physical copies of their evidence to key delegates. The backup plan was working. Humanity does not claim to be perfect. We have fought wars. We have made mistakes. But we have also shown remarkable capacity for cooperation in crisis. When faced with global challenges, Earth's nations have repeatedly come together for the common good. Sherval, the elder council leader, raised a hand. Your time is nearly expired, Human Hudson. Jack nodded. In closing, I ask this council to judge Earth not by our worst moments, but by our potential. Not by what we have been, but by what we are becoming. The Vorax offer a path of subjugation disguised as protection. We ask instead for partnership based on mutual respect. The time indicator flashed 0. Jack bowed slightly to the council and returned to his seat. The chamber had fallen completely silent. After a moment, Sherval spoke. "This is irregular. The evidence cited by the human representative is serious. If verified, it would indeed invoke the Altarian precedent." Supreme Commander Dravik rose immediately. "These accusations are baseless. The human delegation attempts to distract from their species' violent tendencies with irrelevant mining claims. The safety of the galactic community is our only concern." "Then you would not object to a review of the cited files before proceeding to a vote?" asked the representative of the Meridian Alliance, one of the neutral powers Jack had been courting. "Delay serves no purpose," Dravik responded sharply. "The facts regarding human history are clear." Sherval's expression was unreadable to Jack, but her voice carried a note of authority that silenced even Dravik. "This council does not vote while questions of fact remain unresolved. We will recess for 2 hours to examine the evidence presented by both sides." As the session adjourned, delegates clustered in animated discussion. Jack felt a mix of hope and anxiety. They had gained precious time, but the outcome remained uncertain. Amelia joined him, her expression cautiously optimistic. "They're actually reading our evidence," she said quietly. "We forced them to consider the Vorax's true motives." Jack nodded, watching as delegates throughout the chamber accessed the mining records he had cited. "Now we wait and see if truth matters in galactic politics." The council chamber hummed with nervous energy when the session resumed. Jack sat with the human delegation, trying to gauge the mood of the various representatives. Some appeared deep in discussion, while others sat in contemplative silence. Sherval took her position at the center of the chamber. "The council has reviewed the evidence presented by both the Vorax Imperium and the Earth delegation. This matter has raised significant questions about our integration protocols." Jack held his breath. Around him, the other human representatives sat rigid with tension. "Before we proceed to a vote, Supreme Commander Dravik has requested the opportunity to address the council once more," Sherval announced. Dravik approached the central platform, his tall form imposing even among the diverse species present. His voice, however, lacked its earlier confidence. "The Vorax Imperium stands by our concern for galactic security. The mining claims referenced by the human representative were routine exploratory filings, standard procedure for all newly discovered systems. They do not reflect our primary motivation." Jack exchanged glances with Amelia. Dravik was on the defensive, something neither had expected. "In the interest of transparency," Dravik continued, "and to demonstrate our good faith, the Vorax Imperium amends our proposal. We suggest a joint oversight committee with equal representation from Earth and established Confederation members." Murmurs spread through the chamber. This was a significant concession, though still far short of full independence. Sherval acknowledged Dravik's statement. "The council appreciates this clarification. Now, as is customary before voting, we will hear any final statements from affected parties." She turned toward the Earth delegation. "Representative Hudson, does Earth wish to respond?" Jack hadn't expected another opportunity to speak. He rose quickly and moved to the central platform. The chamber fell silent as he took his position. All eyes turned to this human who had challenged one of the Confederation's most powerful members. "Thank you, Council Leader," Jack began. "The people of Earth appreciate Commander Dravik's revised proposal. However, we respectfully maintain our position." Jack paused, looking directly at the representatives of the major powers. "Throughout our brief time in this chamber, many have spoken about humanity's history of conflict. This is true. We have fought wars. We have divided ourselves along countless lines. But this is not the complete story of who we are." Jack's voice grew stronger, filling the vast space. "When disaster strikes any part of our world, nations set aside their differences to provide aid. When faced with global challenges, we have repeatedly demonstrated the capacity to work together. Our scientists collaborate across borders. Our artists share cultural understanding. Our people increasingly see themselves as citizens of Earth first, not just of individual nations. He noticed several delegates nodding, particularly those from the Sovereign Worlds Compact. The Confederation was founded on the principle that diverse species could come together as equals while respecting their differences. We ask only for the opportunity to join you on these terms. Jack took a deep breath before delivering his final point. We understand the concerns about our readiness. Therefore, Earth proposes a compromise. Grant us provisional independence with a review period of 5 standard years. During this time, we will demonstrate our commitment to peaceful integration while maintaining our sovereignty. This approach honors both the legitimate security concerns of the Confederation and the right of Earth to self-determination. As Jack returned to his seat, he could feel the energy in the chamber had shifted. His proposal offered a middle path that might satisfy multiple factions. Shirval called for the vote. One by one, delegation indicators lit up on the massive display at the front of the chamber. Jack watched anxiously as the numbers climbed. The Vorax bloc voted largely against Earth's independence, though a few of their allies abstained. The Eldar split their votes, with a narrow majority supporting Jack's compromise. The Nithic Collective voted unanimously in favor, as did the Sovereign Worlds Compact. When the final tally appeared, a moment of silence fell over the chamber. Independence with provisional status, 212 votes. Protective oversight, 178 votes. Abstentions, 31 votes. Earth had won. The human delegation erupted in restrained celebration as Shirval formally announced the result. By vote of the Galactic Council, Earth is granted provisional independence with full review in 5 standard years. The Sol system will send a permanent delegation to the Council effective immediately. As various representatives approached to congratulate the humans, Jack found himself face to face with Supreme Commander Dravik. An impressive performance, Human Hudson, Dravik said quietly. Remember, provisional status can be revoked. We will be watching Earth closely. As we will be watching you, Commander, Jack replied evenly. I look forward to proving that humanity deserves its place among the stars. As Dravik moved away, Amelia joined Jack. So what happens now? She asked. Jack looked around at the chamber, at the thousands of different species who would now be humanity's neighbors, partners, and occasionally rivals in the vast galactic community. Now, he said with a smile, the real work begins.